Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to a new UDISinfo Labs webinar. After a short break, our team is back and ready to bring you new sessions. We have been a bit busy. As you may know, last week we held our annual conference in Ljubljana, which brought together more than 600 people from the counter disinformation community, and it was an absolute blast. So thank you so much for the fantastic turnout. And for those who miss it, we look forward to seeing you at the next one, which will be held between the 6th and the 9th of October 2026 in Vilnius. So mark your calendars and don't miss the opportunity. My name is Raquel Miguel. I'm part of the research team, and I will be moderating our session today, where we will question if AI detection tools are really useful, and we will present a benchmark that tests their effectiveness. Our speaker today is Zuzanna Wojciak, a program associate at Witness. But before introducing and leaving the floor to her, let me remind our audience the proper context of these webinars. UDISinfo Lab is a non-profit organization gathering knowledge and expertise on disinformation in Europe and supporting the community. And with these webinars, we give voice and visibility to the brilliant work that is being done by many experts, with the aim of sharing knowledge and fostering dialogue. As our audience might already know, the session will be recorded and the playback will be available on our YouTube channel very soon. A few more reminders. You can subtitle the conversation in your preferred language using an AI-driven tool that you can activate in the caption section by clicking on the tab, enabling the translation option, and selecting your language. It's very simple. And second, for communication purposes and for the Q&A session, we will use Slido. You can open the app on your phone by scanning the QR code you currently see on the screen, or type slido.com in your web browser, and when requested, add the hashtag disinfo. Let's briefly practice how to use this tool by answering 2 questions. And please tell us, where are you joining us from today and which sector you represent. A quick reminder for, Vilnius, that's fantastic, our next venue. Greece, yeah, more European countries, strategic communications, that's not a country, but it says a lot. Brussels, Belgium, Israel as well, Riga, Bucharest. Okay, we have a very good representation from Europe. Quick reminder for the latecomers, slido.com, hashtag disinfo. Munich, a lot of people from Germany, great. Okay, maybe we can go to the next one and have a look at the sector you are representing, so that we can have an idea of, wow, a big percentage of people coming from academia. I suspected this before, and media as well, NGOs. It's fantastic. Many sectors are covered. But yeah, mostly from academia and others that are not being disclosed. That's fantastic. It's good to know that our audience comes from different backgrounds and also from different locations. Thank you so much for your patience during this introduction, and now let's get started. As already mentioned, our speaker today, Zuzanna Wojciak, is a program associate at the Technology Threats and Opportunities team at Witness, where she supports the work around synthetic media detection and the running of the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force. Prior to joining Witness through a project on AI and human rights based at Queen Mary University of London, she studied the human rights impact of the use of emerging technologies in policing and also the long-term societal dimension of AI-related harms. Zuzanna, I think your work and expertise in human rights is crucial to today's discussion. We often talk about the risks AI poses in our field, but AI can also be used for good. For example, helping detect AI-driven disinformation that harms people and communities. But the aim is not just to put AI at the service of countering disinformation, but also at the service of actively protecting human rights. And the key question for us today is, how do we make sure that detection tools truly serve those who need them most? I mean, fact-checkers, journalists, and civil society groups working for a healthy information ecosystem and against rights abuses, and especially at the intersection of both disinformation and human rights. I'm sure that you will enlighten us by presenting the truly innovative and effective AI detection benchmark, right, developed by Witness. And without further ado, I give you a very warm welcome and pass you the floor so you can elaborate on this.
Thank you so much, Raquel. I can share my slides. Awesome. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
So thank you for that amazing introduction, Raquel. I'm very excited to be here and to present our benchmark TRIDE, which stands for Truly Innovative and Effective AI Detection Tools. As Raquel mentioned, through that benchmark, we try to bridge the gap between AI technical capabilities of AI detection tools and ensure that the human rights considerations are incorporated in their development, and also ensure that they are effective in supporting those most threatened by the deceptive AI and those who experience those threats the most, and that includes human rights defenders and frontline information communities who are actively ensuring that information that we receive and their communities receive is authentic and safe. So before I dive into the details of the benchmark, I want to quickly introduce Witness. Witness is a human rights NGO that centers around supporting journalists and human rights defenders in using video and technology to protect and defend human rights. And it's mostly grassroots led. We operate through 5 regional teams that work directly with the communities to empower them to use videos for human rights accountability. And we also, through that work, get insights into their perspective on technology and their experiences and concerns into how emerging technologies can impact their work and what are their needs to deal with that. And through that, my team, Technologies, Threats and Opportunities, brings those considerations into the center and issues guidance, reports, and trainings to address them and support these communities, but also takes them further into policy and advocacy discussions to ensure that technical solutions are human rights centered and address communities' needs, and to also ensure that policies and regulations that drive those technical solutions also are mindful of that. And that work started in 2018, where Witness started looking into how generative AI can impact its ongoing work and video as means for evidence, and did that mainly through 2 mitigation approaches, detection and provenance. And in this session, we'll focus mostly on how AI detection can support human rights defenders, fact-checkers, and journalists in verifying and using information. And for that work, focus on the detection. One of the main observation was that AI detection tools are a way to mitigate threats posed by deceptive AI and synthetic media, but in order to do that, they need to be accessible and effective. And one of the initiatives within that allowed us to observe how the challenges of using AI detection tools on diverse real-world content was the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force. And that's an initiative that assists journalists and fact-checkers in analyzing potential deepfakes through connecting them with media forensics and deepfake experts. So the way that works is that journalists can submit cases to us where they encounter images, videos, or audio that could be AI manipulated or generated. And then we share those pieces of content with media forensics and deepfake experts who have access to very advanced tools and can analyze those pieces of content and deliver very timely evidence-based assessments. And that work started in 2023, where and since then we supported information actors around the globe, including in India, Mexico, Ghana, Sudan, Ukraine, Venezuela, and Georgia, in a lot of different contexts, including elections, conflict, or other very high-stakes scenarios where disinformation could have an impact on human rights or democracy. And we keep expanding our network and working with more and more partners and continuing that election focus. This year, we worked around elections in Philippines, Egypt, Iraq, Ukraine, and Bolivia. And we also look forward to 2026 and supporting elections in Uganda early next year. The work of the force allows us to get a first-hand view into both what trends we see in synthetic media, because we receive content from fact-checkers, journalists, and human rights defenders and see what they encounter in their day-to-day work. And at the same time, from the technical solution perspective, we can see how effective AI detection can be on these examples. And as a mitigation solution, we can see the challenges, the gaps in design and development, and also the complex knowledge that is required to navigate this very quickly evolving field. And looking at the trends in synthetic media, here are a few that I wanted to highlight that come from the work of the force. First, we receive a lot of real, authentic content that political figures in question try to discredit by claiming that it's AI. So for example, we receive video that were not manipulated, but because whatever politician said in them is uncomfortable, the politician wants to take advantage of lack of understanding and media literacy among the audience and convince them that it's AI and it's not actually real. Another interesting trend is the prevalence of synthetic audio. For the first 2 years of the force, 2/3 of the cases we received were audio, which then points to this difficulty between how more difficult it is for us to rely on our ears when we encounter AI audio compared with AI video when we try to rely on visual clues. But that changes with the more and more advanced AI video generators. And in the last few months, we did see a significant increase in the examples of AI video that we receive. And lastly, last interesting part is the mix of synthetic and authentic content. And here, what we see is that there are both AI generated and authentic content portraying the same real life event. One example was protest in Turkey, where there was a video of a person running in a Pikachu costume that was filmed by other protester, and that was an authentic video. But based on that, somebody AI generated a video of a protester in a Pikachu costume. And in that case, we had an authentic event and both authentic and synthetic footage showing the same event. And it's interesting to see how that may affect public perception of events, as well as collective memory, and how confusing that can be. On the technical side, we can see how detection, when effective, can really help mitigate crises in real time. Here are some of the cases where forces analysis was included in news articles or fact-checking reports to comment on those pieces of media that we analyzed. And we can also see how those analyses contribute to media literacy efforts and can enhance public understanding of synthetic media. So we want to use these analysis we provide as a way to give more insight into detection and show our partners how it works and what exactly does it mean. But at the same time, we hope that when reporting on those cases, our partners will use that to further share that knowledge with their communities and therefore build media literacy of their communities and how they see and navigate AI-generated content and AI detection. However, unfortunately, what we see in the force is that while AI detection can be really effective for some, it falls short for others, and especially for the content shared from the global majority. On that graph, we can see that in over 1/3 of the cases analyzed by the force, detection tools did not provide reliable and conclusive results. And we'll look at 2 cases that illustrate that gap and that challenge. Here we had a deepfake video showing Vladimir Putin giving a speech, and it's an example of where detection tools can be highly effective because of the type of the content. So here, 3 teams analyzed the video and found evidence of AI manipulation, and that's because of the factors such as the fact that the audio was very clean, the fact that there was only one speaker who was at the center, directly facing the camera, and also that person was a recognizable global north figure, which allowed experts to use person of interest detector. Person of interest detection tools are trained on a lot of data of specific people and can work very well to detect deepfakes of those specific people. And they're usually developed with important global north politicians in mind, such as Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump. And because of that, they could provide a very highly accurate results. And the detection process overall was very easy. However, in contrast, here's a case where detection didn't work very well. And that was 2 audio recordings featuring Han Sen, a Cambodian politician. And because of the very low quality of the recording, the background noise that hinders the detection, and out of distribution data, that the detection tools were not able to provide a definitive result in that case. And for example, here the audio was in Khmer, and AI detection tools are often trained on mainstream languages, and they were not prepared to handle an audio in Khmer, and therefore were not able to provide a conclusive results. These are some other factors that we see a lot that hinder the detection efforts. So we saw low quality and high compression of media, lack of diverse training data, background noise, background music, and cross-talking, different types of content that are missing from the training data. For example, we once received a walkie-talkie conversation, and that type of radio conversation is not something that tools were trained to detect and therefore couldn't work on it. We also see content featuring unknown individuals and noise level as one of the big elements that make detection process difficult. And having all the cases analyzed by the force, we took the lessons from the interventions and translated them into the tried framework to understand what the challenges are and what should the questions be where we want to think about evaluation and what is a truly innovative and effective AI detection tools that can effectively support the communities that we serve. And for that analysis, we came up with 6 key considerations that you can see on the screen. And that is performance in real-world conditions, transparency and explainability, targeted accessibility and usability, fairness and representation, durability and resilience, and integration into broader verification ecosystems. And I'm going to go through them one by one and discuss what lessons come from the cases and how they should form an evaluation of truly effective AI detection. Firstly, looking at real-world scenarios, in that case, we received an audio featuring 2 Nigerian public figures, And in that case, because of the low quality, high compression, and background music in the recording, the tools could not provide a conclusive results. And those features here are attributes that we often see in content shared online and pose to a big challenge where AI detection tools are often trained on very clean, very perfect data, and the data we see in real world and shared on social media is very imperfect. So that prompts us to ask the questions on how the tools deal with qualities typical of deepfakes, such as low quality or background noise or compression, whether the tools are trained on varied file types, compression, social media, and messaging apps formats. So to ensure, for example, that a tool can work effectively on both on both file format of a video downloaded from TikTok, as well as file format downloaded for YouTube, and whether the tools are tested on diverse in the wild content before deployment. Another real-world consideration is new and unexpected types of synthetic content. So in that video that showed the bombing of Evin prison in Tehran and was featured in several news articles, when analyzing that video, one team of experts noted that their tools they did not expect to ever analyze infrared footage, which was the video in question. And so their tools were not trained to analyze that. And because of that, they could not provide a conclusive result. And that leads us to question on how well can the tools handle emerging and unexpected types of synthetic media, how the teams are prepared for that, and how they update and maintain their systems to respond to those new types of outputs, and whether they have a structured framework for regular evaluation to ensure that performance can be assessed accurately over time. Moving on to the second consideration, we advocate for transparent and explainable tools. Well, in our work of the force, we tailor the assessments we provide so that they are understandable to fact checkers, and we communicate them in a clear and transparent language so that they feel confident in using them and communicating them responsibly to their communities. And we also provide as much detail as possible, both on the scope of the tool and what the tool was designed to detect, what is the process of the detection, and what are the limitations, and how these limitations can impact the detection results in the specific case that was analyzed. So we want the tool developers to ask questions: what information about the tool is communicated to the user, and whether it's done in a clean and understandable manner, whether the tool's purpose and scope are clearly defined, and whether the tool offers detailed insight, for example, pointing exactly where the AI manipulation happened so that the user understands it better, and also the limitations of the tool and whether users can easily understand these limitations and how they impact the results when interpreting them. The third element considers targeted accessibility and usability. And here was a very interesting example. The fact checkers had two images, one manipulated showing former President Lopez Obrador with El Chapo, and the other the original image that was the basis for the manipulated one. But when they uploaded it to a publicly available AI detection tools, they received conflicting results. So the tool said that the manipulated image is original and that the original image is manipulated. And when they shared those images with us, Forces experts were very quickly able to provide a conclusive result because they have access to a very advanced AI detection tools. And that highlights this element that those tools need to be accessible those advanced tools need to be accessible for actors who rely on them the most and depend on them in their work. And at the same time, we considered different barriers of access that may restrict usability of the tools. For example, the technical knowledge requirement, costs, as well as circumstances in which our partners operate. So, for example, asking whether a tool can operate in areas without a stable internet connection, whether the tool is either free or priced affordably for its targeted audience, and whether people with basic technical skills can confidently use it and understand the results. Moving on to fairness and representation. In that case, we have on the slide, we received a video of a former president of Ghana. And here, even though our experts were able to provide an assessment to say that the video is probably authentic, they couldn't do it using their tools because a combination of a compression and a darker skin color could lead to inaccurate results and skew the detection outcomes. And that highlights another important part around equity and ensuring that the tools are trained and can serve equally across different contexts and demographics. And to ensure that we can ask questions such as whether the tool can reliably function across diverse regions, languages, and contexts, whether external diverse teams were involved in testing of the tool, and whether the data sets were also collected in a responsible and ethical manner. Consideration number 5 concerns durability and resilience. And here we have an interesting case where actually the force received a number of pieces of content in Arabic and noted that their tools were not trained to analyze this type of content, so they were not able to support. However, after receiving a few cases, it prompted them to update their models, and now they are able to analyze content in Arabic. Moving on. And that points to the importance of maintenance, which I also mentioned before, and constant evaluations to ensure that the tools can perform accurately and on diverse types of content over time and how they can be improved. And for that, we can ask questions on how frequently they're tested and updated, and whether the users are informed about their updates and their impact. Sometimes in conversations with fact checkers, we learned that if they use a tool and the tool provides inaccurate results, or they see that the tool just doesn't work well, they will discard it and not use it again. While that could have been because the tool has not been updated, but once it's updated, they will not go back to trying it, but because they're not aware of that element of the tool's maintenance. So it's important that those updates are communicated to the users and that they are aware of them. It's also important to consider whether the tool can easily adapt to and incorporate new technology advancements, which, as we know, in generative AI are happening all the time, very quickly. And another very important question is whether there are processes in place to prevent outdated tools from producing false and misleading results. And that ties into the fact that if there is a tool who hasn't been updated in a long time, and it will probably not be updated, it's more responsible to retire it and remove it from access so that people don't use it and then don't receive inaccurate results rather than keeping it there. So standards and benchmarks are necessary to ensure that there are procedures and standards in place to prevent that and safeguard this. And lastly, we have the 6th consideration on integration into broader verification ecosystem. In that case that we see on the slide, we received this photo which shows a Ukrainian soldier looking like he makes a Nazi salute. And in that case, detection tools did not provide conclusive results, and therefore our experts had to resort to other verification methods, including traditional open source methods and other manual image analysis tools to reach a result. And that ties into broader witness advocacy, where we see AI detection as only one part of the verification process and not a solution that can deliver a definite answer as to whether a piece of content is authentic or not. And rather, it should be used together with other tools and complement that process. So here we have to ask ourselves, how well does the AI detection tool fit within the broader information verification workflow, and can it be easily combined with other journalistic and verification methods, whether results that are communicated add value to broader investigations in cases where the force's experts cannot provide a definitive or conclusive result, and because of low quality or whatnot, we still communicate these results because we believe that they can still complement what our partners already know, already gathered, and can be communicated in a way that can be still useful for their broader verification processes. And lastly, there's the importance of context and how that can be integrated into the detection process, and how it's always important to have that person who is aware of or is familiar with the context of the content or the language or whatnot to be able to provide this additional perspective on top of the detection results. Through these analysis and those considerations, we translated them into yes and no statements and that form a checklist that AI detection tools developers can use to evaluate their tools. So the statements reflect the considerations of our report and are distributed across the life cycle of the tool, from the design stage through the development, the testing, implementation, and lastly to the maintenance. For each answer, there's a specific number of points allocated, and at the end, there is a minimum score to evaluate whether a tool is truly equitably effective or not. And we want this checklist not only to be, it is designed as a resource for the technical actors who can then use it to evaluate their tools. But at the same time, we recognize that advancing effective AI detection requires multi-stakeholder engagement. And for these reasons, we want this checklist not only to serve the AI detection developers, but also be a useful resource for policymakers, funders, standards bodies, and governments to guide them on how best to support and promote inclusive and responsible AI detection solutions. And so to that end, in our benchmark, we also included actionable steps for those actors to guide them in how to best support these efforts. So for example, the developers are encouraged to adopt the benchmark and design adaptable, user-friendly tools that leverage diverse datasets, are regularly updated and evaluated, and provide transparent, clear, and actionable insights. For standard bodies, we encourage them to assist in that process for establishing guidelines, especially on transparency, explainability, and updates, so that detection tools are more aligned with sociotechnical evaluations and also with global best practices. International and domestic regulatory efforts should strengthen accountability mechanisms and structures and establish oversight mechanisms and governance to ensure that AI detection regulations reflect principles of trustworthy and human-centric AI, which also form the essence of instruments such as the EU AI Act, and that they're both technically viable but also effective from the socio-technical perspective, and also to invest in media literacy efforts to improve public understanding of AI-generated content. While the technical solutions are very important, media literacy is another element that also needs to be present so that we can ensure that the broader audience can also effectively navigate the current information ecosystem and the increasing volume of synthetic content. And lastly, for governments and market leaders, the benchmark encourages them to increase investment in AI detection technologies and sociotechnical evaluations while reinforcing accountability frameworks and prioritize as well public interest AI funds. We see this benchmark was launched over summer in July, but we see it not as a completed process, but rather a work that can expand and can be accompanied by other types of activities. The MNW dataset is one of them. It's an open source dataset developed together with Microsoft AI for Good Lab and Northwestern University. And it's open source tool to evaluate detection tools on how they perform on diverse AI-generated content, as well as real-world content. And to that dataset, Witness contributed the in the wild examples we gathered through the work of the force. And we are looking into other ways in which we can move this work further, and we want to work across both the technical space as well as advocacy and policy. We're looking into how implement the benchmark, how to stress test it. We're looking into red teaming activities and engaging with all types of different actors to ensure that it can be implemented, adapted, or it can inspire other types of project policies or regulations. And I think I'm right on time, so I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about it. I will put the link to try it in the chat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing whether you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zuzanna, for this fantastic presentation and for the good call to the community to help expanding your work. It's time now to start the Q&A session. As a reminder, please use the QR code to join Slido or type slido.com, #thisinfo. We have around 15 minutes for your questions. And at this moment, we are almost 60 people in the room. Okay, well, we have already some questions on the screen. Maybe we can start with one coming from Pablo that has been voted. So I guess it's very interesting for the rest of the audience. Pablo says, if most AI detection tools fail under real-world conditions, should we even be using them in crisis verification workflows? Or is their presence giving us a false sense of security? Very good one.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think detection is not perfect. And at Witness, we tried to advocate for a very comprehensive approach to threats posed by synthetic media, and detection is not the only one. The complementary solution is provenance, so watermarking, metadata, and including the information about how content was created in the piece of content so that people are informed and can know how to interact with it. However, that solution is not perfect either, and detection is seen as something that can assist while the provenance is still being developed and improved and making more accessible. I understand the tools fail a lot. However, there are still cases when they work and they can provide valuable input. So we still believe that it's better to have them and to use them rather than not. Whether they provide a false sense of security, I think it goes back to our point where we don't want the detection tools to be perceived as the authoritative answer and rather a part of the puzzle. And when we work with our fact-checking partners, we also provide them with training on both generative AI techniques and AI detection technology so that they have good understanding of how AI detection works, where it can may fail. And even if we can't provide them with a conclusive assessments, we still believe that that information can be used by them in whatever way they see fit and inform their other verification processes, if that makes sense. But I understand the sentiment. It's very difficult to settle at something that's imperfect, but we still believe it's beneficial.
Yeah, and I guess, Zuzanna, it's also important to highlight that the people who are using them must actively involved in making decisions. It's not just to leave all to a tool, right? So, yeah. Let's go to the next one. I would like to pick up a very practical one coming from Max. Max is wondering if they can test their disinformation detection tool using Tride. So can you explain if people who have developed tools can use your framework to test them?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be, we would love to hear feedback on how your tools perform. I put a link in the Zoom to our policy brief on the overview of Trite. And there is a link to the actual checklist, but I also will add that in the chat in a second. So at the end of our report, there's the checklist that I mentioned, and you can use those statements to see how your tool performs. And if you evaluate your tool and you would like to reach out, we would love to hear how it performed and what your thoughts are on the benchmark and whether you have, any feedback is always welcomed.
Thank you so much, Zuzanna. Another question refers to the update process. Tride looks comprehensive, however, the technology moves fast. How will you keep the pace as new models and tactics emerge? What's the process for updating the framework?
Tride was launched in July, so it's still an early product, but we are looking as to how to keep it, future-proof it, to keep it as relevant for as long as possible. There's a part of the checklist and part of the considerations that is dedicated to ensuring that the tools itself are as can be updated and evaluated as often as possible. The process for updating the framework, we're reaching out to we're discussing Tride with a lot of stakeholders and hearing their thoughts and opinions on how whether there's a need for version 2 or whether there's a need for an accompanying piece of work that can make it sort of as like an updated version. But we tried to, the considerations that are there are still relevant, and considerations such as transparency, accessibility, fairness are not something that will, if it can only become redundant once the tools are truly fair and accessible and durable, which that would be great, but it's not the case yet. When it comes to real world challenges, I think is the biggest one, to see what are the new challenges that are triggered by new technologies. And it's something we're looking into, but we don't have a specific process for updating the framework yet.
Thank you so much. There are two related questions. Wondering about, according to your experience applying the framework, if there are any AI detection tools that are publicly accessible to the public and also freely available and that provide decent results. So according to your experience and after the application of the framework, would you say there are very good tools you could recommend and that they are free, open, and accessible to the public?
We don't recommend any specific tools that are publicly available. And however, I can share a link to a tip sheet that Witness developed on how to responsibly use AI detection tools. And there is a process when using a publicly available tool, what to have in mind and what to test it, to ensure as much as possible that it will support the case that you want to use it for. And I think this is a useful resource in that case because different tools can perform well on different types of content. We don't recommend any specific tools, but this is an approach that I could recommend here.
Mm-hmm. One of our approaches as well when trying to detect AI generated content is to test many different tools with the same picture, video, or audio, or also using different versions of that picture of audio with the same tool. I don't know if you have the same advice, but yes, to add it. One more question. You mentioned real-time interventions, but how feasible is it to respond in real time to AI-driven threats? Aren't we inevitably late in detecting and calling out AI-generated content?
Yes, I think it goes back to the first question where provenance would be the ideal solution when we have the information about how content was created or edited right there, but we don't have access to this type of solutions yet. So detection is the best next complementary strategy. It's very difficult to it's very difficult to the way social media is designed right now with the algorithms. Of course, the information spreads so quickly, and then it's very difficult to counteract it. And in some cases, even though some information is fact check, some people choose not to believe it anyway. So I think that's another part of that people, the way social media is constructed and people interact with it makes it very difficult in detecting and calling out AI generated content. But we find that this real-time intervention for our partners is still useful because they have communities that trust them and look at them for information. So in that case, those real-time this real-time assistant is very, very useful.
Okay, thank you, Zuzanna. Someone is also asking about, can anyone turn to Witness for fact-checking?
So I'm not sure. So we at Witness, we don't fact-check claims, but we worked with fact-checking organizations. So if you are a fact-checking organization that would be that would like to learn more about the work of the force, on the link that we shared on the chat to our Witness website, there is an expression of interest form that you can use, and we will reach out to you. But as of, we don't fact check any claims or any videos or content, if that makes sense.
I see you have already posted plenty of links in the chat on Zoom. So thank you so much for these resources. One more question. Considering the different contexts and cultures and countries, and according to your experience in evaluating the tools using these frameworks, do you think it's more effective to have a different tool specifically designed for every context, or more universal tools that can be adapted to the different contexts and linguistic differences?
That's a very great question. I don't know if I have a specific answer, but it points to this notion that there are always trade-offs when it comes to technical solutions. And on one hand, when you think about a tool that's designed for a very universal tool that can work in every context, it's very good from the user perspective because it does not require a lot of technical knowledge to use it, and can be very, yeah, it's very easy to operate and does not require a lot of knowledge. But this very vast training data would decrease the accuracy, or it may not, or it may be trained on a lot of techniques, but still there may be techniques that are missing, and it would not work on that. And then if we have very specific tools for specific context and linguistic differences, they would work very well on that type of content. And personally, I believe in tools that are designed with specific audiences in mind and are very intentional about that. But these efforts would have to be accompanied by media literacy efforts and ensuring that those types of users know what the tool can do, how to use it, and being aware of those specificities. So I don't think that there's like a perfect answer to it, but it's a very interesting conversation and interesting thoughts to have when we talk about technical solutions.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Now let me take advantage of my role as a moderator. You have already mentioned it during the presentation, but maybe you can elaborate on how can AI developers and policymakers use your framework to design more effective detection solutions, and how can TRIDE be used in the development stage in some way as a guide in making better tools?
Yeah, so that's the purpose of TRIDE. So we hope that throughout reading our report and seeing the considerations we highlight and using those step-by-step checklists when designing the tool, the developers can check whether their tools work on this type of content or whether they can deal effectively with low quality, and prompt them to consider how actually well they communicate the results, or how not only we want that benchmark to prompt the developers to think beyond technical metrics and really engage with what the audience is and what the audience needs from the tool, and how to most effectively develop the tool that supports them. So through following the statements in the benchmark, we believe that it's a very useful yes or no guide to allow that to happen.
Thank you. What is the biggest priority when it comes to generating awareness about TRIDE? I have lost the question, sorry. What do people need to know about this framework? Just in case you would like to send a wrap-up message, a final message, a clear message for our audience today.
Like a pitch for TRIDE. I think the biggest message of TRIDE is putting technical solutions in a specific context and understanding that the technical community and developers operate on very specific metrics like speed, efficiency, but we always have to place these solutions in specific contexts that are used and think about communities that use them, and use that as a guide on how to develop those solutions and make sure they actually work in the context they're supposed to work. And that TRIDE, it's not only for developers, but also it's a very holistic document that can give policymakers and other bodies a lot of insights and what they can do to advance these solutions and support this detection infrastructure.
Fantastic. And I think the last question is great to wrap up. So in the nearest future, nobody is going to believe anything posted through different media sources. Do you have any hopeful message to wrap up this webinar, Zuzanna?
It is a very bleak thought, but I believe that I believe in witnesses' approach and prepare than panic. And I think once we panic, we will lose focus of everything that we can do. And there are lots of things that we can do, and there are lots of really great efforts to make provenance more accessible and available in different types of media, and to ensure that detection works better. We can't control what people think, if people will believe what they want to believe anyway, but I still believe we have a lot of control on how information is communicated and how we interact with it. And I think that and media literacy efforts can be very powerful and helpful. So we should be hopeful, even though it's sometimes very difficult when we see what's happening on social media.
I think the whole counter-disinformation community is working precisely in order to this doesn't happen, right? So thank you, says one of our attendees. And I would like to say thank you again, Zuzanna, as well, for this exciting discussion. You did a great job by addressing all the questions. And I'm sure our audience has a lot of food for thought now. And as usual, we would love to hear your opinion on the session. So please fill in a rating survey after the webinar ends. As you know, you can also suggest topics to be covered in our sessions down the line. We always welcome your ideas. And before wrapping up, a quick reminder that the recording of the webinar will be available shortly on our YouTube channel, and that we will host more webinars in the upcoming weeks. On the 6th of November, we will explore how historical disinformation can be used as a tool to legitimize aggressive politics and to weaponize the past with Chiara Torrisi. And on the 21st, Sergei Polyakov from the University of Amsterdam will provide a broad overview on Russia's system of information control with a report about the organization ANO Dialogue. And yeah, we hope to keep seeing you around in those webinars. And thank you again, Zuzanna. Thank you very much, Isabella, our support in the background. And thanks to everyone who attended. Have a fantastic rest of the day and see you very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.